welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, today, after the sound and fury of the Rajya Sabha elections, let's now take a look at the next big ticket election that is around the corner, the presidential elections. In this, of course, the NDA has a majority, but it would be interesting to see whom the BJP, especially Prime Minister Narendra Modi, nominates, because he is known to throw up a surprise. The names doing the rounds, well, they're there for all of us. There is an expectation that he may appoint a minority member as the president, given the fact there is censure from the international community for some recent remarks by his party people. There have already been 4 Muslim presidents in office. There have been 2 Dalits. There have been 1 woman, 1 Sikh president. So interesting to see what kind of combinations, what kind of candidate the Prime Minister will come up with, because all these things do matter in terms of symbolism. And of course, there is also the office of the vice president. Ramnath Kovind, the president, I'm told, has already started scouting for a Lutyens bungalow. So I expected that neither he nor Venkaiah Naidu will be getting a second term. So, well, political Delhi is hotting up to discuss the ramification, candidates, and also to take a look at the office of the president. Take a look at some of the past precedents. There have been face-offs between prime ministers and presidents. What kind of a president does India need today? That is also something I'm going to be discussing with my panel. Joining me is Dr. Sanjay Baru. He's an author, commentator, political analyst. Neerja Chaudhary, political analyst and columnist. Ashutosh, he's the founding editor of satyahindi.com and a columnist. Neerja, very exciting times coming ahead. First, let's take a look at the present before we go to the past. So what are you hearing about the next president of India?
What one has been hearing is that it may be a woman. It could also be a tribal woman. Given that we've had only 1 woman president, and as you said, we have had 4 minorities, 2 Dalits, and these are very important sections. And as you said rightly, that this has symbolic value also. So at the moment, having won the UP elections, the BJP with its allies is fairly comfortably placed. 48% of the electoral college it has. On the other side, Congress-led allies have 38% and 14% are so far unaligned. Of them, Mamta and left are not likely to go with the BJP. The YSR, Congress and Biju Janata Dal could consider. Naveen Patnaik recently met the Prime Minister. Jagan Reddy met the Prime Minister. Therefore, I think BJP should be home and dry unless the entire opposition gets together. Now, what KCR has been doing, Sanjay Baru will tell us because he's in Hyderabad. He has been meeting a lot of people. He's taken a very strident stand suddenly against the BJP. Is it because he sees himself as an opposition candidate for the president? I mean, that's a question mark. Finding out there. But overall, I think it is possible that the Prime Minister may go for a woman this time.
Prime Minister may go for a woman, Dr. Baru. That's what I've also been hearing. There have been names of various governors, women governors, tribal ladies also. Somebody even raised Nirmala Sitharaman's name, but now she's been given a Rajya Sabha extension. Plus, they are saying she's a Brahmin, so nahi hoga. So what are you hearing sitting there in Hyderabad?
You see, first of all, the most important qualification for anyone to be the President of India is that he or she should enjoy the 100% trust of the Prime Minister of India. No Prime Minister, to the best of my knowledge, has ever selected a president because of this constituency-wise symbolism. It's not that you get Muslim votes with a Muslim president or Dalit votes with a Dalit president or whatever. I mean, these are pure symbolism. It doesn't take the Prime Minister any distance. The Prime Minister wants a person who he knows he can 100% trust, right? I mean, in the last 75 years, 3 presidents have given trouble or kept the prime ministers awake. It used to be said of Rajendra Prasad that he gave a lot of trouble to Nehru. It is well known that Zail Singh gave a lot of trouble to Rajiv Gandhi. And there have been, rumors about people like K.R. Narayanan being a bit difficult for Mr. Vajpayee in the beginning. But otherwise, we've had rubber stamp presidents, right? Mr. Kovind has been actually a very good textbook president. I mean, he's Dalit, he's done a superb 5 years. There have been no criticism of his behavior, etc. So I will not rule out his getting a second term. Why does Modi doesn't need a woman to get women's votes or Muslim. In any case, no Muslim will vote for Narendra Modi, even if the president of India is a Muslim. So let's see. I mean, these are all. I was involved to some extent in the process which resulted in the election of Pratibha Patil, and I can tell you that nobody knew till the last minute that her name would pop out of the box.
The Pratibha Patil's case was also because Sonia did not want, Pranab Mukherjee to take office. Her candidate Shivraj Patil was not being accepted by the left, so they had to come up with some acceptable face. Narendra Modi has no such problem. Whoever he decides, isn't that right, Ashutosh, will be the candidate for president.
Priya, first of all, I will not risk to guess who will be the presidential candidate because that's always hazardous when Modi is there as a prime minister. I can only tell you that the three criteria which will force Modi to choose the presidential candidate. One, should be totally non-assertive, who will do whatever will be asked to do. Secondly, since Modi is the most political prime minister we ever had, so the politically beneficial will be the candidate for the BJP. And thirdly, somebody who believes in the RSS ideology that is Hindutva. So if anybody thinks that the top constitutional position in the country will go to somebody who does not believe in the RSS ideology, and also let's put it very bluntly, that when we talk about somebody believes in RSS ideology, that excludes the Muslims and the minorities and the Christians, because ideologically these minorities are supposed to be antagonistic and historically also, civilizationally also, and politically also. So I personally believe that somebody will be like Kovind. I totally rule out Kovind being given a second term because that's not how Mr. Modi operates. Because he would like to oblige somebody and would also like to tell others that, look, I can make anybody as a president. I can take anybody from the ground and take him to the top notch. Because when the last time the elections happened, nobody had guessed that even the Kovind could be the prime minister. And suddenly he was asked to resign as a governor, and then he became. And that's how this has been. Let's also forget that it's going around, though I do not know. I'm again guessing that like Atal Bihari Vajpayee, somebody like APJ Abdul Kalam will suddenly come up, but that was Atal Bihari Vajpayee, not Mr. Modi. So three criteria: one, totally a rubber stamp; secondly, who believes in the RSS ideology; and thirdly, who will help Modi in elections. That can be an OBC, that can be a Dalit, maybe a tribal. Not I will not guess the fourth criteria.
Why not a Sikh, Nirja? Another name that is doing the rounds is, somebody on social media. Of course, everybody speculating, said Hardeep Puri because he's a Sikh. I think, but Hardeep Puri is a man for all jobs. Someone is saying if Nirmala Sitharaman is shifted, then he can be the finance minister. So he's really the most acceptable face in the cabinet currently. But why not a Sikh in the Rashtrapati Bhavan? Modi needs the Sikh votes.
I think Hardeep Puri probably will continue in government rather than be sent to. I mean, I'd be very surprised if that happened.
That was just a social media.
I think it'll be a very unexpected name, very low profile name. A tribal woman, could it be? Anyway, I'm going on the woman track. It will be unexpected. Mr. Modi loves to give surprise, pull a rabbit out of the hat, so to speak, particularly to surprise us in the media and Lutyens Delhi. So that I'm sure he will do again. But, if you look at the presidents in the past, and others have said this, what is it that's required? Of course, a president who will work in tandem with the prime minister. And if you look at that, Pranab Mukherjee, who came from the UPA and Congress all his life, of course, huge experience of government and knowing the system, he worked with Modi beautifully. We believe that he used to give advice quietly. Modi used to seek his advice quietly, but he never let things come out. And there weren't discordant notes at all in the way Pranab Mukherjee, of course, even went to that RSS function. So you can have people and yet work, harmoniously. And essentially, the job of the president is the custodian of the constitution, to keep the government on that straight path. But whether we will get that kind of a president, and we don't know. Because if you have a powerful prime minister like Mr. Modi, then it makes it difficult for the president. Even, Pratibha Patil, who was being said, her name was, Pranab Mukherjee, it wasn't acceptable, and the left leader said, why not a woman? And at that meeting, suddenly Pratibha Patil's name came up. And first woman president, but she had to work under tremendous constraints. She could have made a real mark being a woman, but could not because of those constraints, even though the government was not a very powerful government headed by Dr. Manmohan Singh, but I don't think she asserted at all that she could have done. And Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad signed on the dotted line as far as the emergency went. So, again, a powerful Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi. Of course, Zail Singh gave sleepless nights to Rajiv Gandhi, who almost dismissed that government.
But he was very servile to Indira Gandhi, saying, I'll even sweep the room if she asks me to. So the Prime Minister decides the nature of the president also.
That's right. And also used to refer to Sanjay Gandhi as Rehnuma. So what he was before he became president and what he was after he became president were two different characters.
But Amaru, I saw you smiling when she was mentioning Pranab Mukherjee, so I want you to run that thought. But also one incident where Pranab Mukherjee and the Prime Minister Modi had a face-off was Uttarakhand, when they wanted to impose president's rule in 2016. He asked, Arun Jaitley was sent to Pranab Mukherjee. Pranab Mukherjee said, why don't you think about it for 36 hours? But the BJP was adamant, Prime Minister Modi was adamant, and he did sign that order and later on regretted it when the Nainital High Court disagreed. But that was the one instance where Pranab Mukherjee had disagreement.
Why did Pranab Mukherjee get Bharat Ratna? He behaved himself. The Prime Minister gave him Bharat Ratna. Pranab Mukherjee knew which side of the toast was buttered and functioned accordingly. I'm repeating what I said at the very beginning. No Prime Minister will think of a president who is not 100% reliable. Pratibha Patil, she was not Manmohan Singh's choice. She was Sonia Gandhi's choice. Let me share something here which I've never shared before. I wrote Pratibha Patil's acceptance speech. Meaning we wrote it in the Prime Minister's office. Acceptance speech, which is normally the first speech that a president gives before just when you become president. Now, that is the defining qualification of a president. Someone who will not create trouble. And now an occasional question, occasional return of a file, that means nothing. You talked about Pranab Mukherjee, wanting a second thought on Uttarakhand. These are par for the course. These things happen, regularly in government. You say, okay, think about it twice. But then the final decision is that of the Prime Minister. Look at the tenure of Narasimha Rao and Shankar Dayal Sharma. They were daggers drawn. They hated each other. And Shankar Dayal Sharma always felt that he was a senior Brahmin North Indian congressman, but the prime ministership was usurped by a junior South Indian Brahmin congressman, and never, forgave Narasimha Rao for knocking off the prime ministership. But the fact is that at the end of the day, Narasimha Rao got what he wanted out of Shankar Dayal Sharma, because the file can go back and forth. You can talk to the foreign minister of today, Jaishankar, who was the media advisor to Shankar Dayal Sharma. He was the press secretary of the president when Shankar Dayal Sharma was president, and he will tell you stories.
I didn't know that. Huh?
Files would go back and forth, but finally, the last step would be the president when he signs, because no president can defy the prime minister. So that's the only qualification. Everything else is secondary. Talk about his knowledge of constitution, protector of the constitution, statesman, all. What was, sorry to use, the primary definition of a good president as far as the person who selects the name, which is the prime minister, or whoever is the politically powerful person at that point in time, is complete loyalty to the person to whom you owe the job.
Well, that is actually the harsh truth. We're going to come back and take a look at some of the past precedents and also the office of the vice president, but a quick break. So stay with us. Hello and welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. This week we're taking a look at the presidential elections that are due soon, and also Ashutosh, the Vice President, unless you want to add something to the presidential conversation in terms of it's understood that a rubber stamp is really the best suited for the House in terms of politically.
I just only want to add about what has been said about the Pranab Mukherjee and Shankar Dayal Sharma, because Pranab Mukherjee and Shankar Dayal Sharma, they had a great understanding of Indian constitutional position, and they were traditionalist, and they were the copybook, the precedents. It's not that they were non-assertive. They were a mature politician, and they knew the constitutional limits of the president. But Jal Singh was not of that kind. Jal Singh was a hardcore political person, and so he wanted to assert himself. He wanted to show to the whole world that he is so powerful. Shankar Dayal Sharma was a very dignified person. Pranab Mukherjee is a very dignified person. APJ Abdul Kalam, very dignified person. So if they did not behave the way people expected them to behave, I think that's we are slightly unfair to him. K.R. Narayanan was a different president altogether, and K.R. Narayanan was a real assertive president. And I think in the annals of Indian political history, he will go down as one of the best presidents this country ever had. About the vice president, I still feel that somebody from the RSS or somebody who believes in the RSS ideology will be there. Look at Venkaiah Naidu. Venkaiah Naidu is a hardcore political person, but he's also somebody who believes in RSS ideology, who did not budge a word here and there. So these are the constitutional position: president, vice president, the speaker, chairman of the and other like. So they have to come from the RSS, because finally, if you go by the RSS ideology, if you go by the ideological mooring of this government, they have to move in the direction of Hindu Rashtra. If there is one fetter somewhere from top to the bottom, they don't want to see that. Whether they achieve that, whether they don't achieve it, that's something else.
The person has to come from the RSS, Ashutosh, but not the name, because last time around the RSS wanted Sushma Swaraj. Modi wanted none of that, because she had a mind
I'll make a small clarification there. Not from the RSS, but somebody who believes in the RSS ideology. Not necessarily somebody had been an SOM Sevak, had been going to the Sakhas and had been doing OTCs and coming from there. Because I doubt that the Kovind had been in the RSS Sakha for a very long time, but he believed in RSS ideology. Sushma Swaraj believed in RSS ideology. Arun Jaitley was not somebody who was a hawk within the, but he believes in RSS ideology. Though he's supposed to be the best person from the Lutyens Club, but he believed in RSS ideology. That's what I'm saying.
What about Vice President? You do this show every evening where I know you pick up all kinds of speculation buzz. So what is the buzz on the Vice President?
I refuse to guess. And since Gujarat, when somebody can be picked up and can be made as a chief minister, and entire cabinet can be changed, then it is hazardous to guess who Mr. Modi will pick. But whosoever is picked, it will be his and only his decision. If even anybody thinks that Amit Shah can nudge him, I don't believe in that. I believe that only Modi knows who should be the vice president, who should be the president. Amit Shah will be asked, please organize things.
In the vice president office, it has to be, obviously someone who is familiar with parliament, because the vice president is also the chairman of the Rajya Sabha.
Asking me?
Yeah.
Well, ideally, yes. But this is something they can pick up very fast, as we've seen. So it need not be, it will be obviously a political person. They will choose who will be. Of course, Arif Mohammed Khan is a name again, that has been doing the rounds. I don't know really whether they will have him as vice president. But, I agree with that, Ashutosh. It's no point getting into the guessing game at all. With Mr. Modi as Prime Minister. One point I want to make, Priya, and that is that I think there has not been a situation like Mr. Modi as Prime Minister choosing. It is going to be somebody of his choice. That's a given. Nehru couldn't get his choice when Rajendra Prasad was made president. He wanted Rajaji. Atal Bihari Vajpayee couldn't get who he wanted. He wanted Krishan Kant. It had all been sealed up in 2002, and then it was overturned. This had been conveyed to Krishan Kant. The whole thing got overturned at the last minute, and it was APJ Abdul Kalam. Indira Gandhi, chose Zail Singh, thinking he was a complete loyalist, and he turned out to be very different. So we've seen, presidents of powerful prime ministers or popular prime ministers not taking the trajectory that the prime minister had thought. But this is not going to happen under Modi. He will ensure that it will be somebody who will do what he would like done.
I think you agree with that, Dr. Varu, don't you? That with Modi, there can be no, the president can't turn on him, he'll make sure there's someone who's.
No, see, first of all, I mean, it's true that Nehru had problems with Rajendra Prasad or that Indira Gandhi had problems with Zail Singh. As I said, Narasimha Rao had problems with Shankar Dayal Sharma. But at the end of the day, the Prime Minister prevails. We have actually not had a situation which would constitute a constitutional crisis in which the president of the country takes a view which is completely hostile to the interests of the Prime Minister of the country. So therefore, and even when we have had weak Prime Ministers, the president has not been assertive. So with a strong Prime Minister, you cannot even imagine such a situation would arise. And it's inbuilt in the system that at the end of the day, the Prime Minister prevails. Now, I think the only situation in which a president has actually some discretion, which is what Gyani Zail Singh tried to utilize, and that is why Gyani Zail Singh became kind of notorious, was if the Prime Minister dies in office. There's a transition involved. And in that transition, momentarily the president acquires a certain role, because the Prime Minister is physically absent, right? And that's the situation that Zail Singh confronted when Indira Gandhi was killed, and there was a choice between whether Rajiv Gandhi or Pranab Mukherjee or Venkatraman or Narasimha Rao. But otherwise, in a normal situation, the president's powers are truly limited by the reality of the Prime Minister's power.
But Dr. Varu, what about K.R. Narayanan? He is the one who actually said he made Vajpayee, I think, bring those letters of support for the first time. Otherwise, it was always pre-poll allies that would be asked to form the government.
No, it's not always. That precedent was set by R. Venkatraman. Venkatraman was the first president to set a precedent when he invited Narasimha Rao on the basis of a letter of support and did not ask him to go for a test on the floor of the House. Narasimha Rao took a test on the floor of the House virtually when the budget was presented by Manmohan Singh in July 1991. And it was understood that the BJP and the left would implicitly support the budget, otherwise the government would have fallen. And I've written about this in my book on 1991, that Venkatraman as president played a role in ensuring that the budget was passed because we had a major economic crisis. But once that was over, then Narasimha Rao was left to his own devices to cobble up the majority, which he did by getting JMM onto his side. But that was a precedent which K.R. Narayanan did not follow. And that is why he had a problem. But that precedent was for the first time.
Ashutosh, you wanted to come in, yes?
Yeah, I think there's a constitutional evolution. Let's look at in 1996 when the BJP was the single largest party, and then the president at that point has gone by that logic. The single largest party should be invited to form the government. If they could muster a majority, then they will continue. But what happened was there was also a possibility of instability if only the single largest party would have been invited to form the government. And that's why second time when the United Front was invited, then they were asked to muster that whether they have the president satisfied himself, whether they had the majority. And that's where the whole process has begun. So I will not blame any president. I think it's an evolution of Indian constitution, and it's good that it has gone through that position. I don't see today happening there because the parliament, the BJP has a massive majority, and so there is it is much easier for the president because president has nothing to do in that scenario, unless there is a coalition, unless there is a fragmentation of polity at the top there. So I feel the president should not be blamed for that. They evolved as the Indian constitution, Indian democracy evolved.
Okay. On that note, thank you all for this conversation. We have exciting times ahead because even though the person may just be a figurehead, it would be interesting to see what kind of message the Prime Minister sends when he chooses the next president of India. On that note, thank you for this conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.